All right, good evening. We're ready to get started. Maseches Chagigah, Daf Yud Beis. We're starting about 15 lines down on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, starting with the words Va'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Let's just be super clear. This whole entire blot is way above our pay grade. The actual building of how the earth was created, what stands on what. We are familiar in American education that there's Atlas who holds the world on his shoulders. The Gemara has a presentation that's almost, from a physics perspective, almost as complicated to understand, because what's Atlas standing on? So we have those questions here as well that will come up tonight, and I claim exactly zero knowledge on what we're doing other than the words on the page. Sorry. Feel free to do some research in the Kabbalistic literatures. That's true. That's true. I put nothing past my father's limits. You never know. Says the Gemara about 15 lines down in Yud Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, "V'amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Asar dvarim nivru b'yom rishon ve'eluhem." There were 10 things that were created on the first day of creation. Shamayim va'aretz, heaven and earth. Tohu vavohu. We'll learn what those two terms mean. Or v'choshech, light and dark. Ruach u'mayim, wind and water. Midas yom u'midas laila, the measure of day and measure of night, which means that the day will always be 24 hours, and as the year vacillates back and forth from winter to summer, the amount of time that night will have will be greater in the winter, and the amount that'll just reverse in the summer, where the nights will be shorter in the summer. So all of these things were on day one. Let's analyze. Says the Gemara, Shamayim va'aretz. How do we know that they were there on day one? Dichsi breshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz. Famous pasuk. Next, tohu vavohu. How do we know about that? The next pasuk says, Dichsi va'aretz ha'isa tohu vavohu. Or v'choshech. How do we know that was on the first day of breshis? Because choshech, dichsi v'choshech al pnei tahom. And then or dichsi vayomer Elokim yehi or. All of these are famous psukim we're familiar with. Ruach u'mayim. Dichsi v'ruach Elokim rachefes al pnei hamayim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu's spirit was hovering over the water, so we see that there's ruach and mayim. Midas yom u'midas laila. Dichsi vayeh ervai boker yom echad. Beautiful. So by the end of day one, we had all 10 of these features. That's what the Gemara says. What is tohu and what is vohu? So says the Gemara in the first middle with lines. Tohu is a kav yarok shemaki veskola olam kulo. It is a green line that goes around the earth. I guess in its equivalent form, it would be kind of like an equator of sorts, but from this presentation, it seems visible. It has a color to it. It's yarok. Goes around the world. Shemimena yotze, should be yotze, not yatza. From there, darkness comes. I don't know what that means, but last I thought, darkness was the absence of light. I don't know what modern science has to say about that relative to this. I just think we just don't understand really what's happening, but that's what the Gemara says. Shneimar, Yashes choshech sisro sivivosav. He created choshech sisro. It's secretive and it's sivivosav and it goes around. That's the green line. What's vohu? We said tohu vavo. So tohu is the green line that darkness comes from. What's vohu? Says the Gemara halfway down. Elo avanim hamefulamos. These are very moist rocks. Hamushkaos bitahom, that they're placed very deep in earth. Shemehen yotz and maim, and from there water emanates. So maybe the miracle of Moshe hitting the rock wasn't so miraculous. That seems to be how the whole world gets water. We're just used to seeing it in other ways. So we know that the people get water from springs all the time. Where does the water come from? So that's what the Gemara says over here, that the water comes from these very, very deep rocks. Shenemar, as the verse says, "V'nata alav kav tohu ve'avnei vohu." Look at the language, kav tohu, the line of tohu. We just said the tohu was the green line, ve'avnei vohu, and the stones of vohu, the stones of the depths, which is very much mashma, like the Gemara just said. Halfway down, 4 lines into the middle with lines Yud Beis Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, "Or b'yom rishon ivri." You just said that that light was created on day one. That's not true. The pasuk says, "Vayitenu sam Elokim b'yirkiyah hashamayim." That HaKadosh Baruch Hu put up the sun and the moon up in the sky. When did He do this? So you just said in our Gemara that Rabbi Yehuda Marav said that the light was created on day one, but here it seems to be that it's created on day 4. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, Damar Rabbi Elazar, or Shabar HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yom rishon. The light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created on day 1 was a very unique light. What was its character? Adam tzofa bo misofa olam ve'ad sofa. If you had access to that light, you could see from the beginning of the world till the end of the world. That's what the Gemara says. But kevan shenistakal HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'dor ha'mavel u'b'dor ha'flaga. Once HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked down the road, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was above time, and He saw that there was going to be a dor ha'mavel and a dor ha'flaga, the nation of the flood and the nation of the ones who rebelled against Hashem. The Rosh Maseh Mikol Kol, and saw that they were going to do bad things. Amad v'ganzo mehem, He hid the light from them. Shneimar v'yimana mirashai moram, that He took away the light from those evil people. Okay, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do with the light? Did He just turn it out? No, He did not turn off the switch. So He hid them. Who did He hide them for? Says the Gemara, the tzaddikim lasi love, it was saved for the righteous in the future. Shneimar vayar Elokim esa or kitov, because that's what the pasuk says in Breshis, that Hashem saw that the light was good. What does tov mean? Ve'ein tov el tzaddik. Tov must be only for the righteous. Shneimar imru tzaddik kitov. Imru tzaddik kitov, that a tzaddik is tov. Good. And kevan shira or shegnazol tzadikim sameach. Once the light, as though the light was a character of its own, once the light saw that it was saved for tzadikim samach, it was very happy. Shneimar or tzadikim is samach, that the light, once he realized he was saved for the tzadikim, he was very happy. However, we also have a machlokes tanaim about this presentation about the light in the world. Kitanoi, or shebara kadosh baruch hu b'yom rishon adam sofa mabid bo misofa olam v'ad sofa divrei Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov says that the light that can be seen inside the world in the early days of day one, that light is a magical light of sorts, a metaphysical, spiritual light that you can see from the beginning of time till the end of time. However, v'chachamim omrim, no, that's not what's going on. Hein hein ma'oros shenivru b'yom rishon. Really, they are the actual luminaries that were created to be put up into the heavens on the first day. But Kodesh Baruch Hu didn't put them in their orbit. The sun and the moon, were not put in their orbit until day 4. That's very interesting. So what was the Metzias? What was happening? I don't know. 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines before the wide lines. Amar Rav Zutra bar Tuvia Amarav B'asar Dvarim Nivra Ha'olam, with 10 things, not that there were 10 things present, but with 10 things. In other words, what ingredients do you have to put in the bowl in order to make earth? In order to make the world? So says the Gemara, here are the 10 things. V'chachma, with wisdom, uv'visvuna, with understanding, uv'das, with knowledge, uv'koach, with strength, uv'ge'ara, with rebuke, uv'gvura, which is another word for strength. We'll get to that in the Gemara. V'tzedek, with justice, uv'mishpat, with righteousness and with justice. B'chesed, v'rachamim. These are the midos with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Let's go through each of them. Last short line. V'chachma, uv'tfuna, when we talk about the first 2, which is with wisdom and with understanding, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu used wisdom to create the ground, and konin shamayim bitfuna, but the heavens, they were built with a different midah. They were built with tuna, which is understanding, and different than chachma. And what about bedas, with knowledge? Says the Gemara, the tahomos, the depths of the earth, those were built with das. What about bikoach ugvura? The pasuk says, mechin harim bekocho, mountains were made with koach, and nezar bigvura, Kadosh Baruch Hu was girded with strength. What about bigara, with rebuke? The pasuk says, amudei shamayim yirofufu, the pillars of shamayim yirofufu, they were shaking, vayismuhu migar raso, and they trembled from his gara, from his rebuke. We'll learn more about this soon. B'tzedek of a mishpat, what about with righteousness and justice that the world was created? These were 2 of the ingredients. That these 2 midas of righteousness and of justice, these are things that help to create the world. They were part of machon kisecha, of building the chair, the kisei hakavod. B'chesed v'rachamim, what about these 2 midos? The word olam is in the same pasuk as rachamim and chesed, and therefore we see that these are some of the midos with which the world was built as well. Again, very difficult to understand all of this, and everything is very specific and chosen in its language. That's chabad, chachma, bin, and das. There are different types of thinking, there are different types of tfisas of understanding, things that are, again, above our pay grade. About 20 lines from the bottom, 3 lines into the wide lines from Rabbi Yehuda Marav. B'shasha bar Kadosh Baruch Hu, when Hashem created the world, it was like the 2 collections of yarn that were used in a weave. So the way that the weave works is that they have long strings that go out, up and down, and then something goes in between with the thread, and then it reverses, and then it goes back and forth, and that's how it creates that weave pattern that we're used to. We're not talking about the weaving one, we're talking about the long ones, and there was a ball of yarn at the end. So this is what the Gemara gives as a mashal. The Gemara says that when Hashem created the world, 4th wide line, that the world was expanding like it was with 2 rolls of yarn of sorts, shel shesi, until Hashem called out and rebuked them and said, stop. Shneimar, amudei shamayim yirofafu v'yismu migara. So pasuk we already saw quoted, but the pillars of the world were shaking and they trembled with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rebuke. So we found this out not even just in the last 100 years. We found out that our current universe is still expanding. This is like new information historically. Genesis and the Big Bang, Gerald Schroeder, all the books that talk about this stuff, that our universe is still expanding because they found this staticky sound on a satellite and they couldn't get the static. That's how they found out that the world is still expanding. It's a little bit mashma like that here in the Gemara, that the world is still expanding, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu said stop. So our Metzias looks a little different than this, but obviously this is right and we just don't understand. But that's what the Gemara says. 5 lines into the wide lines. What does it mean, Rish Lakish says, when the pasuk says that I am Hashem Shakai? Anihu shamarti la'olam dai. I'm the one who said that to the world it's enough. I'm the one who said it. That's what the pasuk means. Same thing happened with the waters. The waters were expanding across the earth. Till the Kadosh Baruch Hu rebuked them, and they dried up. And then all of the waters that were about to be created, they all were destroyed. 15 lines from the bottom. Tana Rabbanan, Beishamai Omrim Shamayim Nivr Utchila B'achar Kach Nivreis Haaretz. First, Shamayim was built, and then Aretz was built. Why? Shenemar, best pasuk in the world for this one. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es Aretz. Of course, Shamayim was built first because that's what the first pasuk in the Torah says. Says the Gemara, not so simple. The Brisa writes, Beis Hillel omrim Eretz nivres tchila. He disagrees with seemingly the first pasuk in Chumash. We'll have to answer for that. He says that when it comes to the creation of the world, that the land was made first. V'achar kach shamayim shenemar b'yom asos Hashem Elokim Eretz v'shamayim. Another pasuk writes that it's Eretz first and then Shamayim. This should be ABCs. We don't even understand the first pasuk in Chumash. So says the Gemara, the Brisa writes that Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, according to your approach that Shamayim came first, you can't build the second floor without building the first. You can't build Shamayim without building Aretz. We're referring here, of course, to the Shamayim as the upper, as to the Aliyah. It has to be rooted in the ground. So Beis Hillel says, just al tzvara. I know you have a pasuk. We have to answer for that. But the Maisa makes more sense to build downstairs before you build the upstairs. They bite back and they said, well, according to your approach, first you're going to make a little joke of a stool, and then you're going to build the kisei hakavod that's backwards. We should be taking care of a Kodesh Baruch Hu first, and our needs should be later. Doesn't make any sense. How do you know that this makes more sense? Says Beis Shammai, Ko Amar Hashem. Hashamayim kisi v'aretz hadom ragli. You're first build the kisei hakavod and then build the ottoman for his feet. Why? The chair is more important. Why are you building downstairs first? Doesn't make any sense. And then this Brisa presents another sheet. Really, both Shamayim and Aretz were created at exactly the same moment, the same snap of the finger. Shneimar, af yodei yisada Eretz v'mini tibcha Shamayim kore ani alehem ya'amdu yachdav. That they were all created at the same time. Ay v'idach Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. My yachdav. What do you do with that? What about the pasuk that says they were created together? So says the Gemara, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel would answer, that you can't separate heaven and earth. It used to be that they were trying to separate from one another very quickly, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu stopped them and said, you have to stay connected. You got to work with one another. Darkness and light, you have to coexist in some way. So dark before light, light before dark, the days are going to roll. But at the end of the day, they all have to be connected to one another. What do we do about the Stiram Psukim? Breshis bar Elokim es hashamayim v'es ha'aretz, and the other pasuk said Aretz v'shamayim. Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom, Kashu Krai Hadad. The Psukim don't agree with one another. And the Gemara answers, Amar Reish Lakish Kshenivru, really when they were created, Bara Shamayim v'achar kach bara ha'aretz, like the first pasuk in Breshis, Shamayim was built first, in theory, it was created first, and only then was earth created. However, Uchshanata, when Hashem actually put them in their place, when they actually had their physical location, Nata ha'aretz v'achar kach nata Shamayim. Okay, so we have an answer, and that seems to be the conclusion that you're right and you're right and you're both right. They were all created, but one was the day of creation, and the other was the day when it was planted, when it was actually put into place. What does the word shamayim mean? We use it so freely. We use it all the time. We don't even think about it. My shamayim asks the Gemara, what's the etymology of this word? So the Gemara answers 2 answers. Amar Rav Yossi, Bar Chanina, Shesham Mayim. Simple. We know the clouds are up in the heavens. They're up in the sky. We fly through them all the time. And that's what the Gemara says. It's talking about water. But b'masnisa Tana, it's a little different. Eish umayim. The shin of shamayim is from the word eish. It's Eish Umayim without the Aleph, and it is Shamayim, talking about Eish and Mayim, which is 2 opposites. Fire and water can't coexist. Malam and Shevin and Kodesh Baruch Hu. Kodesh Baruch Hu brought these 2 things that are opposites, with Tarfan Zebazeh, and he inextricably connected them together. Rasman Rakia. That's how he made the heavens. So the heavens is really a mix of Eish and Mayim. Shal Rabbi Shmuel es Rabbi Akiva. Kshayim Malchim b'derech. Rabbi Shmuel was walking with Rabbi Akiva. Omar Lei said to Rabbi Akiva, Atasha shimash das nachem ishgamzu kapes shana. You learned under Ishgamzu for 22 years. Please teach me some Torah. Shahaya dorish kol esin shebatorah. And Nachem Ishgamzu, he darshaned every S in the Torah. And we got a couple in the first pasuk. Bereshis bar Elokim es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz. These are 2. Es and S. We should make a distinction as Balei Tefillah, as whatever, but halachically it's not a big difference. They mean the same thing. So it says the Gemara, Es Hashemayim V'es Ha'aretz, Mahaya Dorish Ben. How did Nachem Ish Gamzu learn out these 2 words of Es in the first pasuk in Chumash? So he says as follows. Amar Lei, here's what Nachem Ish Gamzu explained. I mean, Nachem Ish Gamzu wasn't around anymore. Rabbi Akiva is the Talmud he's speaking. Amar Lei, he says to Rabbi Shmuel, very simple. Ilu Nemar Shamayim V'aretz. If the pasuk would have just said Bereshis bara Elokim Shamayim V'aretz, if that's what it was, and it didn't have the word Es, Hayisi Omer, I would have thought Shamayim Shemosh El HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shamayim Va'aretz Shemosh El HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just make sure that note is correct. Yes, that Shamayim Va'aretz are the names of Hashem. Why? Listen to the language. Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, Hashem created. Who is Elokim? Bereshis bara Elokim Shamayim Va'aretz. So without the word Es, it could just be that Shamayim Va'aretz are part of his name. But instead, Bereshis Bar Elokim, what did he create? Es HaShamayim Ve'es Ha'aretz. He adds in the 2 Esim in order to separate Shamayim Va'aretz from being Hashem's name. That's not right. Hashem's name is not Shamayim Va'aretz. Hashem's name is Elokim. And that pasuk it's Elokim. Achshav shenemar es shamayim v'es haaretz shamayim mamash and eretz mamash. Now we understand. Without the word es in the first pasuk in Chumash, we would have made a mistake. The Bereshis bar Elokim shamayim v'aretz, that Hashem is the Elokim shamayim v'aretz, that would have been his name. That's not right. So then the Gemara says, well, I understand why you have the first es. Bereshis bar Elokim es shamayim v'aretz. Why do we need the second s? Says that's what the Gemara says. Ve'es haaretz lamali. I understand the first one. You're afraid we're going to misinterpret his name, and that's a problem. So we have to put in the first s. But why the second one before haaretz? Says the Gemara. Lahaktim shamayim va'aretz. Says the Gemara to show that these were made in a certain order. If you would have said that it was shamayim va'aretz without the ve'es in between, I might have thought they were created at the same time. We added an s to say no, they were made in sequence. First shamayim was made and then aretz. And then if that's true, that really they were made first shamayim and then aretz, why does the next pasuk focus on aretz before shamayim? If shamayim was made first, Bereshis bar Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz, so shamayim was made first, and then what's the next pasuk? Ve'aretz ha'isasov vavo. Michti b'shamayim aschel b'reisha. In the first pasuk, you said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that we created the world, we created shamayim first, and then the second pasuk says that we're talking about only seemingly we're talking about aretz. So why is that say va'aretz ha'isasov? So it says the Gemara, Michti b'shamayim aschel b'reisha. Ma'ishna dekachashiv ma'isa aretz. Why are we discussing this now? It's out of order. We should talk about shamayim first because shamayim was created first. Why are we talking about aretz? So it says the Gemara, we have to give more praise to aretz than we do to shamayim. Why? Says the Gemara, just imagine a flesh and blood king. He says to all of the people, everyone get up early. When he woke up, he saw that men and women had all congregated outside the castle. Who gets better praise? For those who are not used to getting up so early. So at that era, all of the men were getting up early to daven kivasikin, right? Let's say. The women slept in and they took care of the kids at home, whatever the case may be. They were not the ones getting up. Who gets more praise? The woman gets more praise. And the Mefarshim explained that Eretz is similar to woman. Shnehem Mekablim, both of them are Mekabel. The earth is Mekabel and Isha is Mekabel. So maybe that's some ideas that are connected here on the side. But that's what the Gemara says. Therefore, Eretz has to be treated first. That's why pasuk number 2 digs in, even though Shamayim was created first, because the Misha Ein Darko Lahashkim Hishkim, we want to make sure that the one who is more unique to show up under the circumstances, and that is Eretz. And the Gemara says 8 lines down, Yud Beis and Beis, Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer, Oy lehem lebrios sheros ve'inan yodos maros. It's so unfortunate for those who see but don't know what they see. Omdos, where that they're standing ve'inan yodos alma hin ondos, and they don't even know what they're standing on. Haaretz alma omedes. What is the earth standing on? And this was the example I started with at the beginning that we don't know what we're talking about. Says the Gemara, don't worry, al ha'amudim, they're standing on pillars. Shenemar hamar gizeretz mimakom v'almodais paltun, that the earth will shake and the pillars that are holding up the earth will shake. What are the amudim standing on? Amudim al hamayim shenemar l'rok haaretz al hamayim, because the pasuk says that it's standing on top of water. So we have earth that's standing on pillars, that's standing on water. And then Maim al haharim, the water is standing on top of mountains. Shinamar al harim ya'amdu Maim. That's very clear. The pasuk says that the mountains are standing on water. Harim beruach, the mountains are standing on top of air. Shinamar ki hine yotzer harim uvorei ruach. And ruach is standing besar. The ruach is on top of a storm. Shinamar ruach zero sadvaro. So we see that the Ruach and the Sa'ara are connected. What is the Sa'ara standing on? The Sa'ara, the storm, is standing on Tuluya bizro shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This entire Gemara is impossible to understand on the surface level. It requires a tremendous amount of research and might even be usher for us to learn, but we're not learning it, so don't worry about it. Bizro shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shenamar mitachas zro solam. That underneath the arm is underneath the world. Okay. Says the Gemara, third of the way down. Really, it's standing on 12 pillars, not just a random number, which we didn't even have a number before. That which is Yatsei, which is standing up the borders of the nations. The Mispar B'nai Israel is actually the numbers of the Jewish people, which is 12 tribes, therefore 12 pillars. Some say that it's actually 7 pillars. Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua Omer, nope, al Amud Echad, it's only one, but Tzadik Shemo, the name of the pillar is Tzadik. Why does that make sense? Halfway down, that really a tzaddik is the one who holds up the world. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, if things weren't complicated enough. Shnei Rakim Hein, there are 2 heavens. Shnei Emar Hein LaShem Elokecha Hashamayim U'Shmei Hashamayim. There's the heaven and there's the heavenly heaven. So there's 2 layers. Reish Lakish Amar Shiva, and this is going to consume the rest of the Gemara for today, that there are really 7 layers of heaven. And here's what they are. Ve'eluhein Vilon, which is some type of curtain. Rakia, which is heaven. Shechakim is like a mill. Zvul is like a residence. Ma'on is like a house or a residence. Machon, similar language. And Aravos is like the plains, like flat plains. We're going to go through each of these. Vilon, what does the curtain do? Eino mishamesh klum. Even though the Gemara says it doesn't do anything, it then says that it does a few things. It goes into its container. In other words, it reveals the sun shachris, and then it comes back out to block the sun arbis. How does that make sense? We know that the earth rotates around the sun, and the earth itself spins. So there's plenty of reasons why we can't see the sun. Is that the vilon? How does that work? If you're in China and you can see the sun at the same time, I don't know what the Gemara means. And this vilon is part of the process of renewing the creations every day.
Maybe it's speaking to the simpleton that just looks at the sun and it's moving east to west, Rabbi. I mean, maybe that's just speaking to the simpleton.
Maybe, but this Gemara is so sophisticated. It's talking about the 7 levels of heaven.
What is the first of the 7? So
that's good. That's good. It's only level 1. I'm a kabel. So we know that this vilon is also part of the process of renewing the world. That it stretched out over the heavens like a tent. So therefore, the vilon is part of. Why does the Gemara say mishamish klum? It does have a purpose. It has multiple purposes. Okay. Next level of the heavens, number 2, rakia. This is again, it's heavens. Shabo, on that level, that's Rechama Ulevana, the moon and the sun and the moon. Kochavim umazalos. You have the stars and you have constellations. Kavun, that they're all set in their place. I guess we would say that they're in orbit, that they're kind of hooked into a system. Shene'emar vayitenu sam Elokim b'Rakia hashamayim, that he put them into the rakia of the shamayim, seemingly they were placed somewhere. What about shechakim? This is the 3rd level, which is the mill. What does it mean, a mill? Shabo rechaim omdos v'tochnos man l'tzadikim. These are mills that are standing in place and they grind man, they grind food for tzadikim. Shene'emar vayitzav shechakim ima'al, that the heaven, the grinder up in heaven, the dalse shamayim pasach, and then the heavens open. Vayamter le'man le'echol, and it drops food for people to eat, the tzadikim in this case. Last short line, Zivul, which means a residence. Shabo Yerushalayim u'Beis HaMikdash u'Mizbeach banui. On that 4th level of the heavens, that's where these very spiritual Yerushalayim components were all built. Michal Hasar Hagadol Omedu Makriva Alav Korban. And on that level, the Michal, the Sar Hagadol, who is one of the great angels up in heaven, he stands and brings sacrifices on this 4th level in heaven. Shneamar Bano Banisi Beis Zvulach Machon L'Shivtecha Olamim. How do we know that that's actually called? How do we know that Zvul is actually called Shamayim? All the previous ones had the word Shamayim in the pasuk, but here we don't really see the word Shamayim in the pasuk that was quoted. So it says the Gemara, Minolan Dekri Shamayim. How do we know that a Zvul has even the title of Shamayim, that it's one of the 7 levels? Answers the Gemara, we see the pasuk says, look from Shamayim and see Zvul, see this level of the Zvul. What about the next one? 3 lines into the middle with lines Ma'on, another location of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara says, Shabo Kisot Shal Malachi Ashar Sha'omro Shira Balayla. It's groups of angels that are singing song at night, and v'chashos, and they're quiet by Yom ibnei kvodim shel Yisrael. They're quiet during the day to give honor to the Jews. Shene'emar Yomam yitzave Hashem chas v'layla shira imi. How do we understand this Gemara? So 2 different pshatim. The more basic pshat is what we are doing right now, which is learning Torah at night. Amar Reish Lakish kol osek b'Torah balayla. Anyone who learns Torah at night, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Chalav Chut Shel Chesed Bayom. Then the next day you're going to have a Chut Shel Chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shneimar Yomam Yitzaveh Hashem Chasto. Matam Yomam Yitzaveh Hashem Chasto. Why do we have this Chut Shel Chesed? Because Mishum Uvalayla Shira Imi. Because at night you are singing my song. We're learning HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. And because we're doing that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a gift of chesed the next day. It's Moshe Chalav Chut Shel Chesed Bayom during the next day. But V'ika Da'amre, some say that this pasuk of Yom and Laila is really just a homily for this world and the next. V'ika Da'amre Amar Reish Lakish, Kol ha'osek b'Torah ba'olam hazeh, shu dome la'layla. Anyone who learns Torah in this world, day or night, but the whole olam hazeh is similar to night. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Chalav Chut Shel Chesed la'olam haba, shu dome la'yom. That the next world, which will be super clear, this is what we learned about this on Shabbos with some of the drashas. I think Rabbi Lev spoke about this, that we don't understand how these things work. Cut off the leg to save the body. We don't understand these things. Anyways, that's what the Gemara says, is that Olam Hazeh is Domeh L'Layla. It's very dark, very hard to understand this world. But Olam Haba is considered to be as bright and as clear as Yom. Shne'emar, same pasuk, Yomam, last of the shorter middle with lines, Shne'emar, Yomam Yitzaveh Hashem Chasto V'Layla Shira'imi. So 2 different pshatim to understand what it means to learn at night. Amar Levi, Amar Reb Levi, Kol haposek midivrei Torah osek b'divrei sicha. Anyone who stops learning Torah in order to have just casual idle chatter, ma'achilan oso gachalei risamim. This person will then be eating the coals of, or the embers of risamim. A resim is a certain type of tree. Shenemar hakotfim maluach This is a play on words. Hakotfim maluach means those who cut away from the luchos. They're the luchos, like the luchos as in like the shnei luchos, like that's you're learning Torah. Alei siach, in order to have conversations. V'shorish resamim lachma. Then the root of the resem tree will become your food. Uminayin dikri shamayim. How do we know that a ma'on has the same status of shamayim such that it is even eligible to be one of the 7 levels of the rakia? Says the Gemara, shenemar hashkifa mi me'on kachecha min hashamayim. Good. What about number 6? Machon. Machon is the 6th level of the heavens. Shabo otros sheleg otros barad. That's where we have the containers of snow, and we have the containers of barad, of hail. The aliyas telalim raim, and we have some dew, which is very bad for earth. Not all are good. The aliyas agalim. These are large containers of water. The chadara shel sufa usaara, and these are the rooms that hold storms. Umaara shel kitor, and they have all of the kitor, all of the fog that's up there, and all of these are held with doors of fire. But also same eish nemar yiftach Hashem lechas otzar rohatov. So says the Gemara, these should not be up in heaven in the machon level. Well, they shouldn't be up there at all. Says the Gemara, Hani birakia isnahu. These shouldn't be up in heaven. After all, Hani ba'ari isnahu. We know that they're on earth because the pasuk says that way. Dichsiv halaluas Hashem min haaretz tananim l'chol temos eshu barak shalav v'kitor ruach saro sadvaro. We say this every day in Pesukei de Zimra. So we know that these things are on earth. So why is it that the Gemara says that they're in the machon, that they're on the 6th level of heaven? So says the Gemara, you're right. You're absolutely right that there's a contradiction. And here's how we answer the contradiction 5 lines into the wide lines. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, David bikesh alim rachamim b'hori. That David requested mercy that they should be brought down to earth. What mercy is he asking? Says the Gemara, Amar Lafanav, David said to Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel olam, Lo kel chafetz resha, you don't like bad things. Lo yagorcha ra, your place should not have bad things in it. Tzadika to Hashem, you're righteous. Lo yagor bim gorcha ra, you shouldn't have any bad things up where you live. Therefore, bring them down here. And that's exactly what happened. So that was David, was chesed for a Kadosh Baruch Hu. How do we know that this 6th level of machon has the status of shamayim? That's where we see shamayim and machon in the same pasuk. Therefore, it is eligible to be one of the 7 layers of heaven. What about aravos, the plains, the last level? So it says the Gemara, quite a bit of detail. On this last level, we have quite a few things going on. Shabot tzedek, mishpat, utzdaka. We have righteousness, we have justice, and we have tzedakah, we have charity. Ginzei chaim, we have the storehouses of life. Ginzei shalom, the storehouses of peace. Ginzei bracha, the storehouses of blessing. V'nishmasa and shel tzadikim, the souls of the righteous. V'ruchos u'neshamos she'asit lihibaros, and the ruach and neshama. Again, very deep ideas. The spirit and the soul that are soon to be created. Lihibaros v'tal she'asit HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahachayos bo mesim, and the dew that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will use to revive the dead in the future. And these are all of the things that are on this 7th level. This is the level of Aravos. So it says the Gemara, 10 lines from the bottom. Tzedek u'mishpat. How do we know that those are on this level? D'chsiv tzedek u'mishpat machon kisecha. It's up by the kisei hakavod. What about tzedakah? D'chsiv vayilbash tzedakah kasher yad. It's going to be up with all of the armories of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ginzei chaim. D'chsiv ki milcham ekor chaim. And what about the next one? V'ginzei shalom. Peace is with Hashem. How do we know? D'chsiv vayikra lo Hashem shalom. What about v'ginzei bracha? D'chsiv yisa bracha me'es Hashem. What about nishmason shel tzadikim? D'chsiv vayisa nefesh adoni tzerura b'tzor hachaim as Hashem elokecha. So that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is bound up with all the souls of the righteous. Ruchos and Neshamos shasi libaros. How do we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with him all the souls that he's soon going to create in the future? D'chsiv ki ruach milefanaya atofu neshamos ani asisi. These are the souls that I made. What about the dew that will revive people in the future? Please God, very soon. V'tal she'asi HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'chayos b'mesim. D'chsiv geshem nidvos taniv. The rain of the heavens we are going to scatter. Elokim nachalasecha v'nilea takonata. What about what else is going on this level of Aravos? The Gemara says 5 lines from the bottom. Sham as well. Ofanim Rafim, different types of angels, v'chayos hakodesh, u'malachei asharis, v'kisei hakavod melech ke'el chai, Ram manisa shochen aleim ba'ravos. And even the throne of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is up on this very, very high level. How do we know that that's where this chair is, that the kisei hakavod is there? Shenemar solu l'rochei ba'ravos b'kashimo. That going on the path ba'aravos on the plains is Hashem's name. And that is how we know the chair is there. How do we know that Aravos has the status of Shamayim? Because Asya Rechiva Rechiva, we have a Gzera Shava. So we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be up on the Aravos, and we also see that it's Rochev Shamayim, that it's in Shamayim. So we see that it also has a din of Shamayim. And we also said v'choshech. Oh, we didn't say. We're saying now v'choshech v'anan v'rafel ma'kifin. So the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is surrounded by darkness, by clouds, and by fog of some kind. Hashem is surrounded. Shneimar yoshes choshech sitzro svivosav sukaso cheshkas maim avei shechakim. But says the Gemara, how can HaKadosh Baruch Hu be draped in darkness? Mi'ika chashocha kamishmayim. Kadosh Baruch Hu is not going to be in dark. We just said that Olam Haba is considered to be Yom. Kadosh Baruch Hu b'chvod v'atzmo, surrounded by darkness, is impossible. Says the Gemara, V'aksiv hu galei amikta mistarta. He reveals all the very, very deep ideas. Yada ma b'chashocha. He knows what dark is, but unahora imei shari. But bright, brilliant light is what stays by him. So how could a Kadosh Baruch Hu be blanketed in darkness? Says the Gemara, Lokasha, this is not a problem, as we turn to the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Bavate Gavoy. One is in the inner chambers of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. There is no darkness at all. It's all light. And Ha Bavate Beroi. But outside of that area where there are other angels, there can also be darkness. There's still one level that's even higher, an eighth level. Like the great ice. Don't know what that means. Says the Gemara, on all of these topics, on all of the things we've spoken about, we're allowed to ask shilas about that. What does this mean? Rakia, what's a vilon? What's zavul? We can ask on all of this, no problem. Mikan va'elach, but anything that isn't listed on Daf Yud Beis in Maseches Chagigah, don't mess. Ein lecha reshus ladaber. Shekein kasu b'sefer ben Sira. The Sefer ben Sira is a huge discussion in the Meforshim as to whether or not it was accepted or not accepted. Was it great? Was it not great? It was written in the time by one of the Batei HaMikdash by Ben Sira. Even Ben Sira is a whole story that his daughter had his child because he went into the mikvah and then she one zera entered her body and she got pregnant. A whole story. Okay, fine. So what does it say in Ben Sira? That which is more wondrous than you are, you cannot be dorish. That which is hidden for you, al tachkor, do not investigate. That which you are allowed to, you may then think about. But anything that's beyond that is ever so hidden, you are not allowed to touch. Again, well, I don't know what most of this means. I don't think I know what any of this means, but it's important for us to learn and to understand that there are things that we don't understand. That too is knowledge. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
You think that